is you know, is I don't want to say environmental because it's, you know,
no,
environmental
totally
ethos,
right.
yeah, but
right. I mean, it's the word
you know, that's
use.
interesting. You know, there's an element of leather, there's an element of these tropical species that, you know, but they're minute in the scheme of things. You know, well,
I mean, we've
those decisions.
And we've always, and I'll use the word justified it because it is ultimately a justification. I have a choice of not using it. I felt it was the most beautiful thing to use at the time. It does have very specific structural qualities to it that some other species don't. Like wingay is very similar to hickory. I can get away with these really slender, tiny legs because it's that material. Like we've also done that same stool in hickory to address that exact same problem.
Hickory in the legs?
Yeah, so replacing legs with hickory. Hickory and wingay both have a really long tubular structure.
Does hickory work?
It does work. And I guess this is where the real irony comes, is that like we had worked with, this part shouldn't go in print, but just so you know the full backstory, like we worked with ABC Home for many years. They made a big push to be fully green or fully environmental.
Who's this?
So ABC Carpet and Home.
Okay, yeah.
This was, you know, many years ago. Mm-hmm. You can just list them as, you know, a retailer.
Yeah.
So we came back and redesigned some of our pieces to eliminate anything that wasn't either FSC certified or reclaimed. And we did a bunch of prototypes in hickory. Hickory totally worked on those. Just be a little more careful in the selection of the wood. Hickory is a little more, or can be a little more splintery, meaning that if it gets a shock on the bottom of the leg itself can split. It's a little less, those long tubes seem to be a little less well bound together in hickory than they are in wingay. And people didn't buy it. They ordered a bunch of these, they went in the store, and then they didn't sell them. And they're like, oh, well, your piece isn't selling. And I'm like, well, the piece isn't selling because the legs are made out of hickory.
Those small legs made a difference?
Mm-hmm. And, you know, we got into, not like a heated disagreement, but a disagreement about it, that it wasn't the fault of the piece. Like, we made a beautiful piece that people wanted to buy. They wanted to fit this other attribute to it that I was never trying to sell it as. And the real irony is, at least at the time, like reclaimed wood wasn't this giant thing yet, or at least not in the furniture world. They ended up reclaiming less heart pine because of this 1%, you know, hickory versus wingay component. And my argument was, and still is, it's always better. I would rather use a little bit of an exotic or a little bit of another material to end up with an object that's not disposable for someone. Like that little block of heart pine had just as much chance of going into the trash or being chopped up or being considered waste. But because of those little wingay legs, that little stool now will have a lifespan of another, you know, 50 or 100 years.
Would you also say that unspoken is also the idea that that choice of the material is obviously small and really well considered, and someone considers that a certain piece of furniture and you see reclaimed wood, it almost suggests the idea that, wow, that person who made that really thought about using that material before they used it.
Yeah, and, you know, and I always had a
like grass-fed beef or something
visceral,
like that.
Like visceral reaction to not marketing our stuff as reclaimed. Partially because I understand, or at least I feel I have some understanding that there are certain fads that come through, you know, and as you've probably experienced, like there was a time where anything that had the label reclaimed on it would sell, or environmental or green or something else. But that same interest level is not going to last for 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is. Like I didn't want.
No, in fact, it could be a backlash.
Yeah, very much so. So like for our primary objective was always to make something, again, in and of itself, self-referentially appreciated. It didn't need this other element. You didn't need to explain that, yes, I reclaimed this material. It was beautiful. If you wanted to find out more about it, yeah, like it's not something we hide. In the same way we don't hide the legs are wingate. It's listed right on every, product card. But it wasn't the attribute that we wanted someone to look at and appreciate as its primary attribute. We wanted the primary attribute to be the object. Secondary attribute, sure. Like if it's helpful to someone to know that it's reclaimed, wonderful. But we never wanted our pieces to have to be reclaimed first and the nice object second. Or this was a nice articulation using a reclaimed material. It should just be a nice articulation, and it also uses reclaimed material. But the primary should have always been what the object was, and that's the difference between selling something that people are going to throw away when the fad is over versus something that someone's going to appreciate, and then it's just another level of interest in it. And that was very, if all reclaimed wood was just gorgeous, like if it didn't always have to have this other reference to, okay, these are the nail holes, yes, it came out of a barn. If there was some way to always represent that material in the same way that walnut is just beautiful. Walnut's been loved for a long time and used in many different things. People love it because it's walnut. They didn't necessarily have to have a history attached to it to appreciate it. And I think that was one of the cruxes always with me in reclaimed material. I didn't want to show off every nail hole. I didn't want it to have to be this reference to it being something prior to that.
If you like the idea that the nail hole is there and subtle and kind of like there at second glance?
Yeah, I like that it's not the primary attribute of it. It's another thing. We never try to hide them. Like they're there, they're not necessarily, it's not the showcase of it. The showcase of it is the material, in the way that beautiful walnut's just beautiful walnut. If it happens to have a bullet hole from the Revolutionary War stuck in it, hey, that's awesome. But it doesn't have to be, I'm not building the whole table around this bullet. I'm building it because it's a nice form, articulated, nice material, and it's got this one other element that's really cool. But, I think that's somewhere where reclaimed material as a trend really pigeonholed itself because it had to look a certain way. And now people always have this association with reclaimed is going to have this barn feel or whatever. You can attach 15 words to it, and you know those words as well as I do, like
vintage, authentic, and
rough top, rough surface, like all these things. Farm tables aren't going to be popular much longer as a thing. I mean, they're already declined greatly, at least based just anecdotally on what we get requests for.
Why do you? Without going too much into it, obviously there's a lure and a draw to the rustic and the reclaimed. Do you think that's similarly that rides a little along the idea of craft, this return back to things that are authentic, one of a kind?
Yeah, and I think that as a movement it shot itself in the foot is that there are only X number of actual authentic farm tables.
Right.
And then all the other ones are faked using, even if it was correct historical material, but all the other ones are faked to look like an actual farm table. And then you get into, a company like, Crate and Barrels or something that are invested in machinery to distress the wood to just look that way. And ultimately, like the majority of consumers wanted the cheap option. They don't, a lot of them don't want to spend $4,000 on that real vintage farm table because there's only 1,000.
Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate that it becomes more about the look, but I hear what you're saying. They kind of shoot themselves in the foot, and it's not like as much staying power to the design. It becomes like a trend.
Yeah, and in that way, it's truly unsustainable.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't.
And then, in the same way, like that, we had such a revulsion to bamboo. Like it has really great environmental qualities to it, but the number of times now that I drive around New York City and see bundles of bamboo flooring going into a dumpster, like that person bought it because they told themselves it was green and it was environmental and it was blah, 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 and then it had an 8-year lifespan. Like there's nothing environmental about that in any way. They would have been better off putting in in some ways